Previously on the Trogly's Guitar Show. So don't forget about that like goal. 2,000 likes, 200 comments saying, please, Terry. And he said he'll bring his original one next time. Thank you, viewers. You did it. Now you get to meet Terry. Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. You didn't think we'd have a like goal just for any regular Goldtop, do you? This is Terry's original 1952, maybe 53. He's hoping I can help him with that today. But parroting his story is not that fun, and he was here anyway, so I'm going to let Terry tell you the tale of it.
I got this as a kid. I was probably 13 years old when I was interested in guitar, and my parents found this guitar at a garage sale back then. Paid either $90 or $150 for it. Very interested in it and spent a lot of time myself. So there was a fella that in their CB club that played for the Navy band, and he ended up giving me some lessons. I used that Les Paul, didn't know what it was all about, kind of my first guitar, really. I played that for quite some time, and this gentleman talked about maybe getting a new one. To make a long story short, we ended up going to a local music store and buying a 1976 Les Paul custom black one with gold trim. Back then, I was 14 years old. I didn't know anything about them, but I was working at the time. Was absolutely loving playing guitar. Paid $633 for that new. I still have it to this day.
Very cool. Those are two great guitars to start with. But what's the story behind the pinstriping on your Goldtop?
On this 52, my parents knew in the CB club there was a fella that owned a body shop. And for some reason, they took this guitar to him before they gave it to me and had my name painted on it and a pinstripe around it. It's kind of cool. Probably kills the value, but it's a really neat story, and it's something that's going to stick with me for a long time. Thought it was so interesting. I didn't know of the value or that it was an early model until many, many years later. A friend of mine that plays in a band talked about it being probably valuable because of the age. So it even means a little bit more to me.
So why are you bringing this to the show today? Is it time to sell? Do you still like guitars? Do you play it much?
Fast forward 30 years, had to work for a living and start a family and grow a family, and I got back into it probably in my late 50s. Now I'm got the same addiction that many guitar players do in buying too many guitars and gear and not knowing how to play them enough. So that's kind of the stage that I'm at. I'm looking at guitars all the time, play a lot because I have a lot more time on my hands, kind of semi-retired at this point. I found in the Facebook marketplace there was a tribute to this 1952 Goldtop. Looked just like this one, and I just said I had to have it. Watching the Trogly show for years, I thought, man, I'd really love to have this thing reviewed and memorialized if I could. So over the last couple of years, I've contacted Trogly, and we set it up, and here I am. I'm so happy that he's going to be doing this for me. I appreciate what he does. He's, as most people know, he's probably the best guy on the internet with Gibsons. So I'm glad I'm here. I'm very happy to be doing what I'm doing today.
So thank you, Terry, for the kind words and sharing this magnificent piece. I've always wanted to document one of the original Goldtops, but the horror stories about the original bridge having to be under wrap that we talked about in his Les Paul tribute episode have always kind of scared me away from these, but the character that this one had, that's the reason I was like, yes, we need to document this thing, because sure, not everybody wants Terry's name on their guitar, but that's the thing. This is not for sale. It's his. He's had it since a young boy. It's sentimental to him outside of just the value that this instrument might hold. So he's owned this one since about 1974. Let's see if we can answer his question real quick. Which one is it, 52 or 53? Well, that first digit in the serial number tells you it's a 1953 year model. But as far as first impressions, this has got a decently chunky neck to it. It honestly starts off a little bit bigger and slims down as you go up. That's a very unique neck profile. And yes, all the stories are true. That is an under-wrapped bridge, but I never thought about the fact that the pickups would have to be lower to compensate for that as well. Because that's the first thing I noticed straight out of the case. They're like all the way sunk into the body, but they have to be. Because when I first saw that, I was like, oh yeah, I need to adjust those pickups, but no, you don't. But this really reminds me of something Billy Gibbons might play with the pinstriping. It might not be the most professional pinstriping job, but it just accents the carve of the belly, and I like their little design in between our tailpiece. The original Goldtops were basically just begging for this treatment. If you're not familiar with who I'm talking about, Billy Gibbons, ZZ Top. He actually has a signature model Goldtop that had the pinstriping stock. But he brought his tribute back so we could compare it, and you can definitely tell the gold finish is vastly different. Like, this one almost looks green in comparison to what we have over here, but you have to remember it's got a little bit more age to it, and hey, Goldtops are known for greening. You can see your tailpiece is just a little bit different. The thumb bleeders stand out quite a lot, missing over here, but easy enough to add. But small details even like how pointy the inlays are, as compared to how rounded they are over on the Tribute, as well as the material they're made out of. But look at the headstock. It's got the low logo, and that will vary depending on your production, but you got your regular high one over here. But you've got mahogany backs, but vastly different colors. But the neck profiles are nowhere near the same. This one's like so slim and this one's quite chunky. And if you want to get really detailed, the style of Klusons are much different. Besides the pinstriping, I think the most standout feature on this one is this zigzag stripe in the wood grain of the mahogany. And the body itself has a really nice chatoyance to it, almost flame-like in the top bout there. And the reason I bring that up is because it makes that zigzag pattern look vastly different depending on the way you're looking at it. But the weight's really not too bad on this one either, but these were the humble beginnings of the Les Paul. Starting for the 54 model year, they introduced the wrap tailpiece, which gets rid of the whole under-wrapping situation. And then for the 56 model year, they introduced the ABR1 bridge. Following that, in 57, they ditched the P90 pickups for humbuckers. And then into 58, we start to transition out of the Goldtops into the well-known bursts that are worth more than most people's houses. So thank you, Terry, for sharing this guitar so we can finally document an early Goldtop on the show. How much is one of the original Goldtops worth? It depends on the day and the model and the condition, but generally speaking, asking prices range from $20,000 to $40,000. And I only say that just to put you in the mindset that these are not $200,000. They get gradually more expensive as you go and get the more desirable specs. So that's why things like this happened, where talented conversion artists will take a guitar like this that's maybe a bit too personal for some people, route them out for the humbuckers, do everything that they want, retop them, reset the neck angle, and make them monster players as a conversion into 1959 specs. And it's due to that they are starting to raise in value, because these used to be really common. You could pick them up for like $5,000, $10,000 for a really clean one, but now that there's less and less of them, they've started to go up. But besides just our guitar, he also brought it in an error-correct case. It's what he got it in 1974. Looks about right to me. The handle is worn, but it's done its job. You've got a regular latch right here in the middle, whereas the rest on the case are the clasp style. And for the real aficionados out there, I counted 4 clasp and 1 latch. But inside the case, we have some additional goodies. He keeps this in here. I believe he said it was a 4th grade art project, where I guess he really wanted a guitar, and this is what he made. It's got the vague outline shape of a Les Paul, but it looks like old magazine cutouts, so it's kind of a time period piece in and of itself. Now remember, this guitar's not for sale, but he was talking in that interview that he thinks that the pinstriping reduces the value. I don't know if that's necessarily true. Sure, not everybody wants a Goldtop like this with his name. However, when there's a story and a history behind it and you have something like this, that just adds to the fun. Looks like he even found his name on something just to put it there. And at one point in time, I'm sure we had all 6 tuners, but they've just kind of fallen off. Otherwise, anything else in here? Some sort of a Bigsby-like teaspoon arm. And this is cool. One of the late 90s, early 2000s playing cards of the original 52 Goldtops. Tells you things like the specs and the history. A viewer actually sent me a complete set of those one time. And we also had an old strap in the case. Now this looks more so 70s to me, so maybe he bought it at the same time that he got his Les Paul Custom. Or maybe this is just the style that 70s Gibson borrowed when they made their own straps. Because I don't think I've ever seen this stitching pattern before on a strap. I wouldn't say it's the most comfortable, but hey, it's part of its history. But since Terry got this used a long time ago, he's always been curious about its previous history and if any modifications were done to it. So, to help him out, let's go ahead and throw this one onto the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs. Inside Terry 53, what do you think? Should we change it out to black plastics? Nah, I think I'll keep those covers on. But thankfully, these do appear to be original P90 pickups of the era. By far an expert from identifying them, but I've picked up a few things over the years. One thing to look for is this, because that's a characteristic of these 50s ones. But over here, here's what the bridge looks like. It matches. And hey, we don't have any tape over the edges, so you can actually see the magnets underneath here. So if you wanted to, you could carefully loosen these 2 screws and flip your magnets around if you wanted to add a phase tone in your middle position. But vintage Goldtops are always happy to see ya, and I'm always always happy to look at them, because your long neck tenon mixed with your P90 screws makes a big smiley face. Then if we're being nice, you could say that the route looks like a shovel, like Blue's Clues vibes. And oh, our bridge pickup cavity has a hammer, but it's being told to be quiet. Shh. While we're documenting it, we might as well take a look at all of the different angles, because you don't see inside a 53 Goldtop every single day. And we can do the same for the bridge pickup cavity, although it doesn't look like there's really much to see here, as our maple cap is completely covered over in that gold finish. But since these pickups need to sit so low, they didn't actually put any springs in here. It's just your regular 2 screws. But I learned something about P90 covers. When I was taking these out, these felt like ultra fragile, and they're so thin. Like, be careful with these, because I feel like you could just literally crush them in your hand if you wanted to, and it wouldn't be tricky. Just for fun, I thought I'd throw a photo of this one to Jim over at Jam City, the guy who does the conversions. And at first he was questioning, are these later plastics? Because the color. I don't know anything about that, but then he was telling me about how thin 52 and 53s are, and in 54 they changed them to thicker. So that's one of those really tiny nitpicky details that you wouldn't know unless you've torn one apart. So I can add that to my knowledge base. Thank you, Jim. As well as Terry. As far as the markings on the inside, I do not see any, so it's not like the later plastics. But another thing to know about these is they are so tight, these routes, you can hardly get the pickups in and out with the covers on. And I think that was the reasoning behind the really thin pickup covers. You can actually see where at the factory they were even shaving them down just to make it fit into it. That is just kind of fun to see. The neck pickup sits so low I was questioning how I would even get it out. The bridge isn't quite as bad in the fit and getting out department. I've got them safely put back in now, but whoa! Almost 10k ohms on the bridge? That seems extra hot. 8.87 in the neck, and they play together at 4.69. And you'll notice this one does not have a poker chip around it. But now it's finally time to talk about this tailpiece. So despite taking the screws and strap button out, you can't actually just remove this from the guitar because the ground wire, in a very novel idea, is soldered to the base plate. I did not know that until today. But now that conversion's making a lot more sense to me, what that circular route was that he was filling in. I was thinking that was like some sort of a barb on the inside of this as an impression to help it not move. But no, that's just where the ground wire comes through. You'll actually see there's something special in our control cavity to allow that wire to go through there that's not on other Les Pauls. But this one reads patent pending on the bottom. I could be wrong on this, but I think eventually they start to say like Les Paul model or something on here. I know I've seen that on 295s before, but then the actual under wrap bridge looks like so. Kind of looks like any other trapeze that you're used to seeing, except for it has a cylinder kind of acting as a wrap tailpiece under wrap. It's just a metal bar, and the strings actually come at quite a strong angle. So you have them come through here and then wrap under, because with everything installed, the bridge just naturally sits this high. Now, if you were to bend some metal, I think in theory you might be able to get a really steep top wrap, but even if so, if the strings are leaving off there, that's not gonna give you very good action, and that's with it decked down. So it's just something you gotta live with on these early ones. But if you're wondering how exactly does this just stay there, there's 2 more pieces we need to look at. Think of this like a giant strap button, but it's just got a bottom base, and then you have a thumb wheel right here that you move up and down like on an ABR1, but you just have a portable moving base. These screws then go underneath here, taking it from this to this. So there's no routes within the body. However, there will definitely be scuffing to the finish under there, as well as other dirt grime buildup. Because some people opt to not do the whole restoration to make it 59, but like make it a 54 or a 56. Because if you take this away, it is a blank slate to work with. You just gotta watch your neck angle and know what works with what. You could even Bigsby floating bridge it if you really wanted to. And next, you gotta remember the internet is forever. If you happen to get your hands on this one day and you're thinking, all right, I'm just gonna pick off Terry, make this my own. Don't. Because here's the thing. Just because you could remove this, because it does not feel like they put a new clear coat over top of it. And if you look at an area right here where the pinstriping has chipped, you can still see the gold finish under it, as well as over here. What's on this guitar is perpetual, because what's gonna get you is shadows. The pinstriping job was done in 1974. This thing has had so many years of natural yellowing to the clear coat that what'll happen is like what happened with our pick guard here. Even though the pick guard is not on it, you can still see the pick guard because the clear coat did not age as much underneath it. Now, this being a white finish, it doesn't look like it's going to be too noticeable, but you can bet your butt this terry here is a lot darker. It's not going to let as much light through. You will forever at least have the shadow of terry on here. So even if it's not this guitar, it's a different one, and you were just doing some research to see, hey, what should I do with this? Just leave it alone. It's not going to be for everybody, but it will speak to somebody. But speaking of the pickguard, even in 1953, you get the divot from the guard. I thought this was kind of funny. You see the chipping of the golden finish right here? It's still on the backside of the guard, so I don't know about you, but I think that marks it as original to me. Either that or it's just been on the guitar a very, very, very long time. But it also answers an interesting question of, did they pinstripe under it? No, so they must have did the striping with the guard on. Just went zoop, and then started a new one as they went around town. But here's a look at our knobs. It's the short ones, not the tall ones that were done earlier. You've got your thumb bleeders as we saw, and we'll have to do a blacklight test, but they look close enough to me. I know what you guys are curious about. Do we have any flame underneath? I'm not seeing any on here, but that doesn't mean that there won't be something, but generally you'll find anywhere between a 2 and 3 piece top underneath these goldies. But now we can move on from our maple top and mahogany body to our mahogany neck with Brazilian rosewood fretboard. Now when this came to me, it was very dried out and poor looking, but after a nice conditioning and cleaning, this is looking fantastic again. You don't have a bunch of fret wear or fingernail divots, but you do have a few small impressions, as well as some minor fret wear, but again, for its age, not too bad a shape. You can see your good inlays running up and down our neck, as well as our tortoiseshell side marker inlays. However, there is one anomaly I noticed. As we come up here, our golden lacquer has disappeared. There's a few different options here. Did it flake off? Or was there a binding repair done here? Because look over here, you can see where the bindings join together. They look good. But over here, there is a very obvious seam line. Now, that's not always uncommon, but regardless, something has occurred over here. It could just be as simple as he rested his thumb here while picking and playing. I mean, there's different ways you can play, or maybe just the picking and scratching ended up flaking that clear coat off. And to me, it looks like somebody had a fret file slip while they were working on it at one point, and it kind of scratched into it. So there's definitely some sort of a history there, whether it was before his time or not. It does still appear to be the tortoiseshell material, though. That's a little hard to see until you get the light on it just right. And for original frets, I would say they have a decent height to them yet. But as far as neck specs, I measure 1.7 inches at the nut, 2.08 at the 12th, 0.89 first fret necked up, and 1.02 by the 12th, but it might be more accurate to take it back here by the 9th, where it's 0.96. So even though it feels beefier up here and like it slims down, it doesn't. It's just the neck profile that changes. This is like a U or soft V up here before it transitions into a more traditional C here. And the contour gauge shows that off beautifully. See what I'm talking about? It's got a lot to the back, but not much shoulder, whereas this, it gains the shoulder and is just completely uniformly round. That's a fun neck profile. I measure a 24 3/4 inch scale. That looks pretty accurate to a 12-inch fretboard radius to me too. As far as neck angle stuff, if I zero this out on the workbench, again, this is all roughly, like it's not perfectly level in all situations. We come over here and place it on the neck. I believe that should give us our reading, and it's about 2 degrees. And I think that's what they talk about with these having shallow necks. Whereas on the Gibson USA version of this guitar, I measure about 5.5. Ideally, you're looking for 4, but there's some fluctuations, and obviously every model's a bit different. Now we can move on to the face of the headstock to show off the original Hollywood veneer, because thankfully we do have some chips in that black paint where you can see that light colored wood. That's not the mahogany showing through, that's the Hollywood veneer. But our truss rod appears to be in great shape on this one. The only thing I don't think is original on this guitar is the truss rod cover itself, because it's the Les Paul Jr. style one, where it's just 1-ply black. Unless there's a small part of history that I'm not aware of, this should be the multi-ply one. Now there's our cool low logo with the finish checking and the Les Paul model silkscreen still intact. And yes, I pulled a tuner just to make sure there was no funny business, but more on that on the back. But now we can move on to the backside. I noticed while filming B-roll, not only do we have this S formation, but you have two eyes right here in the form of symmetrical dings. Not sure what caused that, but it nearly makes some sort of a serpent dragon thing. That's kind of fun. He definitely put his fair share of dings and scratches as he was learning. It looks like the strap he used really kind of chewed up the finish along here. But let's get to the fun part, the pots. So in that 1959 Burst episode, when we were trying to figure out if it was legit or not, one of my biggest regrets during that is I forgot to check the pot codes. I was just so used to historic style reissues that when they're blank like this on the backside, there's nothing to read. But on the vintage ones, it's on the side. So for example, this one, everything we need is right here. So the first 3 digits tell you who the manufacturer is. That's still true today. So when you see 137 on the back of 70s pots, that's CTS. Now, 134 is Centralab. And in the 50s, they were a little bit different. The 3 actually stands for 1953. Then the next 2 tell you the week of production. So these date to 1953, the 22nd week. And then further down, you can see that they're 500K pots. There are actually markings on the top, though. In select locations, you can see USA engraved into them, as well as Centralab's branding, which has a diamond around it. And then I was always curious why these capacitors were called Gray Tigers. And now I know, because they literally say Gray Tiger. So nothing too groundbreaking here. But look at this. Usually when I think a grounding wire channel, I don't think of it to be the same size as our regular wiring channel. I wish I would have known to look for that in the conversion to see another block of wood filled in. But again, we can look at that photo of a retopped one, and you can see it's a channel that basically just does this, and then they can solder that wire there to the bottom of the tailpiece. But in my opinion, everything looks good in here to me. We even still have the original plastic output jack plate. It doesn't really come out by much to show you the output jack, because it's rather tight wiring. But I took it off just enough to know that nothing else has been screwed into this. Or if it was in the exact same holes, so you're good. But here's the bottom side of the trapeze when installed. And just for fun, here's a look at our thin binding in the cutaway. So you can see the maple cap exposed a bit, and some more nicks and dings and impressions along this side, as well as by our top strap button and over here. As far as our toggle switch route, looks about correct to me. As far as the brown back plates, they have a lot of red in them. Kind of reminds me of chocolate. And here's the back plate for the main control cavity. But now from our body to the neck, it's interesting. You can see how much more red this mahogany is versus the neck. That's not a finishing difference. It's just this is the color of this mahogany, this is the color of that. I don't have any suspicions that the neck has been taken off or redone or anything like that, but we can do a blacklight test to know for sure. There's definitely some beautiful finish checking here and a couple of nicks and dings, but nothing too excessive that's going to inhibit play. But here's the backside of our tuner. I went ahead and lightly lubricated the tuners. Not enough that it's going to leach into the finish or anything. These tuners, they get replaced for a reason. They're very tough. These 2 tuners are kind of bent and hard to move, but they still technically work and they're original, at least to the best of my knowledge. It's a single ring, single line Clusen, and we'll leave this for the 50s vintage experts. Almost looks like it says Apple at the bottom, but it says applied. Likely for patent applied for, then that's their patent number. And I was looking to see if there were any other screw holes or if anybody has enlarged that. Here's an approximate measurement. Looks good to me, but our serial number dates this one as the 558th one made in 1953. The headstock's definitely gotten dinged up a little bit over the years. But here it is all strung up. Let's just say it's about as tricky as a Bigsby, but I had to restring it like 3 times because I was thinking it's a wrap tailpiece, so why don't we try the Bonamassa Tech double string balls? Because then the sharp part wouldn't be right there. But you can't do that on the bridge because then the ball end sticks out too much, and you basically create another slot for the string to go in, and then it doesn't fully ring. And then technically, I guess you could put the string in this way, and then the ball end just sticks out top here. I've never seen anybody do it that way, but I don't see why it wouldn't work. But I do believe this is the intended way, to have the ball end of the string hide away under there, and then you pull it taut, and then you have to feed it under through here again, kind of like a tension bar on a Bigsby, and then take it up here and secure him down the way you always do. Just for fun, while restringing this, I totally didn't accidentally do this and say, hey, that's a good learning point. Here's what we were talking about earlier, how when you underwrap it, which is the unintentional design for this guitar, you get playable action. But if you top wrap it as intended, oh, talk about high action, holy cow. That's nearly half an inch high versus nice and low. Next thing, I'm starting to realize why a lot of people don't love their 52s and 53s and do end up converting them, because they just don't play that good. I can tell there's at least a little bit of a leveling issue here, and then the neck angle's so shallow that when you bend the strings, they start to choke out. So I have this now at what I consider a medium action, where most every single note will ring out. But depending on your playing needs, you could lower the action a little bit. I mean, if you're only playing chords and a few basic things down here, you're never going to notice the choking out. But that's what the trapeze is all about. But now the blacklight test. Very important. Almost forgot it. So here's the glow of our pickup rings as well as the guard. Those seem to be even. Our knobs are looking good. Even our switch tip has a nice glow to it. I was unable to take it off. It's like really seized on there and I didn't want to break it or anything. But you can see the areas where the Goldtop finish has chipped away a little bit, as well as some of the finish checking. But overall, Terry on the front is pretty good. The face of the headstock is also looking very nice and even. But the back is kind of interesting. I'm curious if him leaving his art project in here has actually slightly leached into the finish. It's either that or this is just a regular stand mark, but it almost has a slightly deeper glow just right here in this whole general area. It's a little bit hard to see it on camera, but it's not affecting the regular finish, so I wouldn't necessarily suggest taking it out of the case now. What's been done has been done. When I first uncased this one, he had the strap on it, and you can also see how that has kind of affected the finish a little bit too. And it's funny how you can tell the story of guitars that way, even without knowing one of the owners. Looking along the other side, it's pretty nice. Our neck is looking good too. You can see some of those impressions back here. And there was definitely some sort of a stand that rubbed through the finish there. Otherwise, we're looking fine. Serial number is under the finish. But if you missed that before, you can easily see it here. It does not have the finish over top of the binding. So some sort of a story going on there. But otherwise, a healthy Goldtop. But all said and done, Terry, the Les Paul, weighs 8 pounds, 10.9 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. All right, so here we go. I've always wanted to try a 52 original wrap tailpiece. Okay. It's not ideal. Basically, imagine not being able to palm mute, having to float your hand a little bit, and having this giant bar in your way. Because I feel like you still could palm mute on this if you were very careful. You just don't have very good control out of it. And again, this is right where you want to be, the edge of it. So you can't even get your palm on it. You basically got to be finger muting it. This thing is so frustrating because it's got really great tone and a great neck profile to it. But I noticed something while playing. The side marker inlays are not centered to where they're supposed to be. That is really off-putting. Until about the 9th fret, then they start to center them. You can really see what I'm talking about here. That needs to be down just a little bit. That's funny. But palm muting is like one of the most powerful techniques. Like, it's not always just chug, 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 chug. Sometimes it's, you have to mute other strings, so you gotta be careful with what you play on this thing. So let's see how the distortion goes. not too half bad, at least on the lower strings. Do you guys realize how insane that bridge pickup is? Because remember, it's all the way in the body, nowhere near close to the strings, as compared to usual anyway. And it's still such a raunchy fire breather. So how do I feel about Terry? Wow. Maybe that conversion we documented earlier was not an anomaly, or they're both just particularly good examples. Not too heavy, very resonant. That bridge pickup just steals the show with a little bit of dirt. It does everything else. It seems to be slightly overwound, but hey, in a good way in this case. Now, as far as how I feel about this bridge setup, it's definitely a lot more functional than the tribute that they did, because at least you can very easily get to these thumb wheels without a problem. However, as far as the palm muting situation, yeah, it's not ideal. Now, could you learn to play this? Yes, but I can see why so many of these have been converted over the years, and that's kind of what makes these survivors special. But by far the biggest shocker about this one has to be the offset side markers. Like, that is crazy. But that was probably all done by hand back then. But thank you so much, Terry, for sharing your personal 1953 with us today. I had a great time documenting it and learning the secrets of the original Goldtops. So hopefully one day we can document an unbound fretboard and maybe even an all gold. I think I've finally gotten that 50s bug to the point where I can totally understand why people hate what I love, the 70s and 80s era of Gibson, because There is something to these. There truly is. There is a huge premium to them for a reason, but a lot of that just comes down to many of your heroes actually played these guitars. So the sound that's in your head comes out of these guitars, but at the same time, they just play and sound phenomenal. There probably is something to that old growth wood versus what they're using today that was grown in a tree farm of some sort. Because these might be from the 50s, but the wood they were using was so much older than we're using today. So you can call it cork sniffery, or you can be a believer. But once you've had a couple of these, you start to realize, okay, they all have these certain things going on. So I can understand why Eric Ernest and a few others have become very familiar with them and have built a career upon it. But I would love to have a complete documentation set of 52 all the way through 1960 on the show. So hey, if anybody else has some nice golden era examples they want to bring over, feel free to reach out to me at austin@troglysguitarshow.com. Otherwise, thank you, Terry, for sharing your cool guitar with us. I thoroughly enjoyed this. If you were asking my opinion, I think you should get one of those conversion bridges, put it on here, that way you can palm mute, because that's going to make this play so much better. And I know the tuners are original, but swap them out for a modern day reproduction, because these things are a pain in the butt. And I think that might be why you haven't played this one as much. So fix the two issues, keep the originals in the case, don't forget about your history, and then honestly sell the tribute. It's a nice guitar, but you've got this. You don't need that thing at all, man. But all right, troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.